I was first put onto Red Candle Games after watching a trailer for their game Detention in 2018. I was taken with it immediately. The sprite work that looked hand-drawn, the clear Silent Hill influences, the music that accompanied it. It all coalesced into what I consider to this day to be one of the most emotionally provocative game trailers I've ever seen, and in spite of my general aversion to horror games, I bought it pretty quickly afterward. I think the horror aspect was downplayed from my expectation, with the game using an initial horror setup as a jumping point for a character study of its protagonist, Shin, a girl attending high school in Taiwan during the White Terror, a real-world event in which Taiwanese citizens were subjected to oppression under the Kuomintang government, which used secret police, mass surveillance, and special criminal law in order to catch out real and imagined dissidents. Detention used the snares of this oppressive setting alongside traditional Taiwanese imagery and folklore to enhance the atmosphere of being trapped within a place that's dominated on all sides by human and inhuman force, both totally beyond your control. In spite of some of its narrative and mechanical flaws, I thought Detention was ultimately a good game. I certainly got what I paid for as an atmospheric survival horror and as a character-driven experience. It stuck out to me for a long time after the fact. So when I heard word that Red Candle Games was coming out with a new horror game that upscaled to a more realistic environment from a first-person perspective, I couldn't be happier, and I bought it on the day of its release on February 19th, 2019, with nary a second to spare. I had never written a guide for a game before, and I wanted to dip my toes into writing one for this. Something about this game made me want to go elbow deep into it and help facilitate the experience for others. I couldn't tell you what it was, but I think the closest thing I have to the answer is the desire to do something just for the love of it. I played the game alongside my iPad, writing down optimal routes through the game's unorthodox puzzles. Obligations to school and life outside of writing prevented that guide from reaching publication in a timely manner, but after about a week I found it pointless to release at all, and by now you may very well know the reason why. If you don't, I'll spoil the ending. People eventually found a letter in Devotion's assets that included criticism of the mainland leader of China. The game was promptly review bombed on Steam, and, cowing the controversy, Steam eventually removed Devotion from sale on the platform altogether on February 25th, 2019, not even 7 days after its release. One moment, I was excited to write and release a guide for a game I felt so excited about. The next, I would find myself one of the lucky people who managed to get a legal copy of the game before it was annihilated from official circulation. I was shocked when I heard the news. I felt defeated. I was upset that fewer people would recognize what I thought was an intense, claustrophobic, and thoroughly brilliant experience. I was concerned for the future of Red Candle Games and the macro implications of all of this. If Devotion could be snuffed out over the course of a single week, what's to stop this from happening to other games, to other studios? I rolled over that thought for ages. I sometimes find myself revisiting the soundtrack, and especially the song that plays at the end of the game. I played the game for the first time on the night it released on February 19th, 2019. The idea to make this video came up days after New Year's Eve of 2023, roughly 4 years later. I wanted to explore my thoughts on Devotion in a larger way than I ever could with a simple guide, and now that I'm getting into this YouTube thing, I figured now is the perfect time to do so. Not only is it something I really want to talk about, as someone who had boots on the ground in Devotion before it got roadhoused by Steam, I feel a slight obligation to discuss it, especially since it was something so few people had official access to. Or, at least, so I thought. This video follows others that have been released on the subject. One among them calls it the most disturbing game that you cannot play. And I would agree with that upon beginning this script. However, it gives me great pleasure to inform you that this is no longer the case. I did some research on Devotion leading up to writing this script, and I found that as of 2021, the game is available to be purchased again. It's available on Red Candle Games' online storefront now, and while it may remain in eternal obscurity due to not being as circulated as it could have been with Steam's assistance, it's my goal to mitigate that however I can for making this video. The fact that this game is on the market again probably caught you with your pants down unless you've been paying really close attention. That being said, its official release date was 4 years ago, not exactly yesterday, so I consider it fair game. As such, this review is going to cover the bulk of the game's plot before different supplemental reading material. If at any point while watching this video you feel even a remote inclination to dip so that you can play this game yourself, I implore you to do so. You go with my blessing. Your final chance to get off the ride before I spoil the game rotten is going to be shortly after the intermission section at this timestamp. From then on, it's a total free fall all the way to the endgame. No prisoner taken, no stone unturned, no holds barred. Those are my terms. If you find them agreeable, Let's begin. We open on a peaceful scene. Your Du Fengye, award-winning screenwriter, and our wife, screen star Gong Li Fong, is busy preparing dinner and making idle chat from the kitchen about the goings-on of the apartment complex we live in. How reassuring it is that your daughter, Mei Shin, is content to stay indoors and keep out of trouble. She tries to talk you out of going to harass the principal at Mei Shin's school. She muses about picking up fruit for your spiritual mentor. You cannot move from your seat. The very apartment begins to rattle. Your vision vibrates as she asks where Mei Shin is. We see our hands come into focus as we stare into them. Li Fong continues to ask you where Mei Shin is. We do not have an answer for her. Devotion's actual gameplay begins as we rise from our love seat and get up. There's a picture that Mei Shin doodled on a piece of paper, and a photograph of Li Fong looking Li Foin in a kipao. While I've never been fond of the conferred name for the genre, Devotion follows in the gameplay traditions of walking simulators like PT, Gone Home, or Firewatch, observing your surroundings from a first-person perspective, and taking various actions, and maybe solving a puzzle here or there to progress. You can poke around your apartment as you like, but our journey will begin outside the apartment and across the hall, which leads back to the same apartment. Going down the hall and through a door at the end begets a scene of an umbrella, a red shoe falling, blood dripping from the ceiling, writing on the walls. Turning around, embracing our first jump scare, we can find a door with a monkey on it leading to the apartment. If you haven't gotten the gist of it by now, we're going to be seeing a lot of this place in the hours to come. It's empty, but for a moving box on the table. Putting the trophies in the nearby cabinet, the bowls in the kitchen, and Li Fong's poster on the walls in the master bedroom alters this place, turning it more detailed, giving it more texture. When you finish decorating, you find a figurine of a ballerina in the fuse box. A song plays on the radio. We fade to black. You gain one of your most indispensable tools here, an engraved lighter, a Father's Day gift from Li Fong. You can leave the apartment and find ominous writing on the wall as you enter a door labeled with a tiger. You enter your apartment to find, surprisingly, that it's occupied. Mannequins of yourself and your wife watching the television, tending to an aquarium. Your wife simultaneously cooking in the kitchen and watching you work. There's a bedroom set up for a little girl close to the living room now, and when you go to the master bedroom, you will find a doll of her to match the mannequins. You can take it and watch everyone take issue with it. Once you position it on the chair in the bedroom, you can find a note about a birthday tradition and see that it's now fully decorated with Mei Shin's affix. You can gain access to the bathroom and find a piano songbook, which is nice since the way to the living room has been blocked off by a mass of mannequins. You play Happy Birthday on Mei Shin's piano. Place the ballerina you found in the fuse box on the cake. We fade to black and a show plays on the television. Our first sign of life in this strange situation comes in the form of a knock on the door. No one is there, but the corridors between our destinations are growing longer. A script on the ground reveals that trouble is brewing, as news comes that Mei Shin is suffering from a sickness of sorts. A door labeled with an ox is around the corner, requiring a key to open in the mailbox. A notice of injury or illness related to Mei Shin can be found on the table in the living room. The trash can by Fengye's desk overflows with crumpled paper. An arowana swims in a cramped tank. I was mesmerized by the latter detail the first time I played this game, and it catches my eye almost every time afterwards. As an amateur aquarist myself, I know very well of arowana. Sometimes known as the Asian dragonfish, you'd be hard-pressed to pick out a higher-prized species among freshwater aquarium keepers. I remember seeing one at my aquarium supply store a month or so ago, an adolescent with muted colors. About 2 years old, and the length of one of my arms from my fingertip to my rotator cuff. It felt like a religious experience, seeing something so highly prized for sale in my little town. Fengye must be a man of means indeed to possess such a pet, but the size of its tank is claustrophobic, hardly appropriate for a fish of its size. We'll come back to this fish and its plot relevance soon, but it was at this point that I began to see the larger picture of discomfort in this setting. The arowana is not alone in this discomfort. You can hear sobbing outside of Mei Shin's room, but you will need to wash your hands in the bathroom before you can enter. You'll find her doll here with needles impaled in various extremities. Removing them begets a diagnostic report and x-rays, and exiting her room reveals that your apartment has been done up to look like a hospital, which I consider to be one of the cooler ways Devotion has made use of the limited space of its gameplay loop so far. In the time since we've begun, we've seen the apartment at its most bare bones, when Feng Ye and Li Fang started to move in. With the swift placement of a couple of trophies, some dishes, and a few posters, we've taken an empty house and turned it into a home. The slow crawl of their newlywed domestic life, guided through mannequins like a curated tour, until we see a photo shoot with their daughter in the master bedroom. And now we can infer that visits to the hospital occur with such frequency that it feels synonymous with their living space. It's a disquieting reality. It isn't one that you want to be left alone in the same room with. Following a brief puzzle with the x-rays and finding a script by Feng Ye that suggests he's trying alternative methods to heal Mei Shin's malady, you retrieve directions from a woman named Mentor Hui to come to an apartment upstairs. After listening to some, frankly, dope music played on a radio and walking through an atmospheric corridor littered with static phantoms, you come across another door, framed by red lighting and covered in talismans, to another apartment. 1987, the year of the rabbit. Except this one is a lot more sparsely decorated. Place your ass upon the love seat and watch the television. Mei Shin is about to perform. Only, we don't get to see it. Instead, behind the couch is our framed family portrait, and something unknowable and immortal hangs behind it as we find ourselves sinking into red liquid. We emerge from a vessel of red liquid, and we see from the corner of our eyes a vision of Mei Shin running into another door. However, we cannot follow her inside as it appears that she locked it behind her. Through this door lies Mei Shin, our answers, a flawless present. But we need to find the key in order to unlock the door. It's been shattered into 3 pieces, each symbolizing a member of the De family, with each one at the end of a puzzle we can find in the other doors we can access in this central hall. They lead to different versions of the De family's apartment through time, 1980, 1985, and 1986. Chapter 2, I would say, forms the crux of Devotion's core gameplay loop. There are 2 more chapters to follow, but the puzzle solving, the primary questions and answers, and the slow burn of the De family's life is all mostly contained within this second chapter. These apartments and the puzzles contained within are not self-contained. Just as our memories of the past become clarified with reflection and gain information in the future, sometimes you will need to obtain an item from 85 in order to solve a puzzle in 1980, and so on. This also means that you're not confined to any room at any time. It's kind of like taking a written exam. If you're having a hard time answering a question, it might be a sign that you should move a little bit further on and circle back to it later. I appreciate the care that they put into this system because while the circuitous nature of Devotion's puzzle solving can also make it seem hard to broach at first draw, It gives you a tangible means through which to quantify your progress. There are little corkboards outside of each apartment that look as though they've had things inside that have since been torn out, but the corkboard gradually fills up again with articles and newspaper clippings that chronicle the Doe family's life through that year, with the more puzzles you solve in said apartment. On that note, we have about 3 years to cover here, so let's take care of business and take things from the beginning. In a word, 1980 is chaotic. There's a household guardian ceremony on to celebrate the Doe family moving into this apartment. In the kitchen, we see a note indicating Li Fong is hard at work trying to pull everything together. Feng Ye has a psychic freakout as he re-enters the living room from the kitchen. Going into the master bedroom and pulling Li Fong's record of Lady of the Pier off the wall reveals it's been used to cover up a hole. Looking inside, we can get some insight into Feng Ye's writing process. Mei Shin plays a piano. She notices the hole as you tap at it from the outside wall, and she demands your attention. You do not want to give it to her. You can retrieve red shoes from Li Fong's vanity, as well as a note from a friend who's gleaned that she may be in financial trouble. We see a couple of clues for a puzzle to come, as well as a wardrobe that's locked. The combination is apparently attached to Mei Shin's favorite picture. Mei Shin's room looks a little different. Stacks of books abound. The shadows of Feng Ye's trophies look like colossi on the wall. In the center is a flower pot with a little note. You've turned my deepest misery into a comforting flower. Going into the living room, we can see that it's now dark and disheveled from Feng Ye's tantrum. A note about a god called Shigu Guayan can be found on the table by the TV. A torn letter from one of Feng Ye's friends informing him that his scripts are shit is on the floor. They are shit, by the way. One need only take a cursory glance to see Feng Ye's writing as vapid, masturbatory trash, but they provide insight into Feng Ye's mentality, and collecting all of them is tied to an achievement, so it's worth your while to pick them up when you find them. A radio host answering a call from Renee in Taipei suggests that it's hard to change a person. I think it's harder to listen to this conversation and not think he's trying to seduce her, but maybe that's just me. There's nothing more we can do here for now, but we can see Li Fong on our way out, placing posters in the corkboard outside the room that gives us some more insight into De's position in their lives. 1985, the year of the ox, is next. It's a dark period for them, literally and metaphorically. A travel brochure to Alishan is on the table, but it would appear Mei Shin is unable to go as she's in the throes of sickness. A ceramic wine pot hangs heavy in the kitchen. A nearby note informs that it's a tradition to brew it for a young girl, bury the pot in the backyard, and then serve it on her wedding day. Going into Mei Shin's room reveals an essay she wrote about her family. In the master bedroom, we see tales of Shigu Guayan have reached the inner sanctum of the De family's marital bed. You can find the Mei Shin doll sitting at your writing desk with a school correspondence journal she's written, bored of staying at home sick and being relegated to feeding your arowana. A cutscene shows Mei Shin bemoaning not being able to go to Alishan despite not feeling sick anymore. She contemplates going on her own, hiding Feng Ye's wallet, her storybook, and her mother's hat in the suitcase outside, going on to hide the key to the suitcase in her hideout. Li Fong asks where all of Mei Shin's pills have went, and as we look up, we can see exactly where. An arowana can be more expensive than a sports car in some parts of the world, just by the way. Pluck the marble from your poor fish's eye and take care to grab the journal entry from the piano. You can go to the wardrobe here to find the Mei Shin doll and a movement puzzle box. Using the marble here allows you to complete it and find the key to the suitcase. Mei Shin's storybook is found here, and you can go to the bedroom to read it to her. Here we see Mei Shin's storybook play out, introducing a taste of genuine vibrance and color into this story for the first time. Her storybook tells the story of a father afflicted by a strange illness, with his daughter seeking the guidance of a goddess to cure his ailment. This leg of the game takes a brief departure from the core gameplay so far, with us taking control of the storybook's main character, Sha, solving various puzzles and doing some basic platforming in order to navigate her way to find the spirit water she needs. We also see Mei Shin and Feng Ye's relationship develop here, with Mei Shin trying to find ways to help the animals we meet out of their compromising positions after we solve the puzzles that involve them. We've seen a lot of scary and troubling sides of Mei Shin so far, but I think this particular part illustrates her true nature a little bit more, as an imaginative and fundamentally kind little girl who tries her best to look out for the people around her. As the story ends, we see that Xia love for her father is the thing that causes the seed that the fertile goddess gave her to bloom into a tulip. Xia and her father, now cured, plant tulips in the valley, and we find an origami tulip, colored and folded from one of Feng Ye's discarded manuscripts taped to the back. If you go back to 1980, you can plant this tulip inside of the flower pot that's in Mei Shin's room, where it will sink into the dirt. Feng Ye suggests it will blossom at a later point. You'll know how right he is if you leave. You'll find a cutscene here where you find yourself outside the kitchen window of your apartment, listening in on a phone call Li Fong is having with her mother about marital grief and financial troubles. 1986 is the last door of the trio, and it's one of the most troubling. A shrine to Qigu Guayan is taking up position in the entryway of the house. A television plays Mei Shin's performance on an endless loop. Qigu Guayan manuscripts are on Feng Ye's desk. Mei Shin has a journal written about how she wants to be famous so she can take care of her parents and have them out for fun every day. After you're finished reading this, we're pulled into a cutscene from Mei Shin's perspective where she overhears an argument between Li Fong and Feng Ye about their financial situation, where Feng Ye tries to browbeat Li Fong into doing housework because taking care of finances is man's work. But he has nothing at all to show for his writing, and as Li Fong points out, Feng Ye has been donating a lot of money to an organization focused around Qigu Guayan. A picture crystallizes of Li Fong having left the family shortly after this argument, with Mei Shin's drawings covering the walls in the hallway to the bathroom and the master bedroom, father and daughter hopelessly adrift. You can use that record you got in 1980 on the record player in the master bedroom here. Mei Shin can be seen crying on the bed, but comforting her only propels you backwards. She disappears, leaving behind a tiara. You can find Li Fong's Qipao dress, torn from abuse, outside the grip of the nightmarishly melting drawings in the hallway in the living room. After a scene of Mei Shin on stage plays out in the central hallway with the doors, you can go into the 1985 room, flanked on all sides by tulips into a corridor overflowing with greenery and torn manuscripts. As you walk through it, Mei Shin narrates a journal entry where she talks about her experience with the storybook, and how her breathing gets better when she folds origami tulips. At the very end of this corridor, we see Mei Shin's bed, a script Feng Ye wrote about the experience, and a fragment of the key we need to enter the flawless present, an illustration of Feng Ye on its surface. We step outside of Mei Shin's bedroom in 1985, and the apartment is miserable in contrast to the scene from before. But we can go into the kitchen to deposit the shoes, the tiara, and the dress into the wine pot before we leave. Another cutscene plays out in the central hallway as we find the letter Feng Ye wrote to the school at the center of the carousel. Infused with frantic energy, it spins and spins ever faster. In 1980, we can put the camera we got from 1986 into the tripod to get a picture of Mei Shin playing the piano. Returning to 1986, we can see tons of wine pots hanging and placed around the door. There's a veritable cellar inside as Mei Shin narrates a journal entry from the future where she discusses her illness causing her head to ache and constrictive breathing problems, imagining bad things happening, having trouble sleeping. We step over a massive banded crate as she talks about her father taking her to a woman named Mentor Hui. Her mother has warned her not to trust Mentor Hui, but she does because her father does. At the end of a hallway, we see a massive vessel filled with red wine and snake coils, and Mei Shin is pushed from high above inside. Just as she makes contact, we smash cut back to the kitchen in 1986. On the floor, red wine, a bloated crate, a script from Feng Ye about a child aspiring to the example of their mother, and a fragment of the key, an illustration of Li Fong, on its surface. A developed version of the photo we took earlier now sits on the table, with its date written on it. This date is the combination for Mei Shin's hideout in 1980. There is an alcove inside the wardrobe where a cutscene plays out. Mei Shin narrates a diary entry where she discusses her anxieties about never knowing what to say when guests arrive. Going to the end of the hallway and approaching the microphone reveals that Mei Shin suffers from stage fright and prefers to sing alone. You're propelled back outside the wardrobe after this cutscene. You see a script about the birthday grab tradition mentioned earlier, as well as the final part of the key we need to access the flawless present, an image of Mei Shin emblazoned on its surface. There's a script, a finale to all the ones we came across earlier, wrapping up Fengya's insipid little story, just outside of the only threshold we haven't crossed yet, Mei Shin waiting just beyond. Our flawless present. Hey, if you're watching at this point, you made it to the intermission. I'm happy to have you. I'd encourage you, if you're watching this on a TV at this point, to get up and have a stretch. Unclench your jaw. If you're watching this on a phone, maybe swivel your wrists a bit. Get a bit loosey-goosey. I hope you're liking this and my other videos so far. I've opened up some of my postscripts about how happy making YouTube videos has made me. If you're having a good time with this channel and want to lend some cash to the cause, I'd welcome any donations to my Ko-Fi or my Patreon. If you don't have it in the budget, and who does these days, I'd also love it if you considered subscribing, commenting, and passing the videos along. Now, I've tried my best to inject a bit of brevity where I could into what is, by all accounts, a pretty sobering and scary experience. But killing off the clowns is as proud a horror tradition as Jamie Lee Curtis, and the truth is, the coming things in this plot are a little difficult for me to make light of. This coincides with us reaching the point in this video I mentioned towards the beginning. Remember when I said that I was going to give you one last chance to walk so that you can retain some endgame revelations for yourself? Well, here we are. So, I'm going to count down to 0 from 5. And if you're still here after, you accept that there's no going back. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. With all the tablets in hand, we could finally cross the threshold to our flawless present. Or not, since it throws you back every time you approach the door. If you guessed that this is a precursor to some spooky bullshit, you guessed correct. This soon triggers a segment where you, pursued by a specter of Li Feng, must traverse a maze of doors in order to find an elevator where you can proceed to a different floor of the apartment. This chase scene is the only circumstance in the game where you can actually die, and I was always, in spite of myself, a little unnerved every time I played it. The solution is relatively simple, and Li Feng is a lot slower to advance than you might expect. As long as you don't look back and you make an effort to avoid doors you've already been through, it should be a relatively straight shot to the end. As you're trapped in an elevator with Chigu Guayan for company, you overhear Li Feng calling into that radio show from before. Li Feng makes no bones about the fact that your ego, your devotion to Chigu Guayan, and your insistence that Li Feng was possessed ended up causing your separation. Your fumbling game is immaculate. But at least we can enter the door to our flawless present now. Enveloped by light, we soon find ourselves back at the prologue. Mei Shin sings on the television. Li Feng teases you about being Mei Shin's most devoted fan. Mei Shin appears from her doorway and stares at you. Looking at Mei Shin causes her door to close and things to go wrong. Enter her doorway and you'll see a vision of Mei Shin asking you where Li Feng is. We experience some scenes from Mei Shin's perspective of her having a series of panic attacks, and shit gets trippy. This eventually concludes with the realization that Feng Ye received notice that Mei Shin suffered from no physical maladies and that the hospital suggested she be referred to the psychiatric department, a recommendation that Feng Ye emphatically rejects. You get a call from Mentor Hui, who encourages you to pray to Qi Guayan for answers. Thankfully, you don't need to look too hard. Your shrine is right behind you. Feng Yu is apparently under the belief that Mei Shin has been possessed herself. You're guided by Mentor Hui during the rest of this chapter, where you traverse through the underworld in order to aid Mei Shin's spirit. It's a ruinous place, scored by rocky outcroppings, the occasional street lamp, and a stream that will act as a ley line for your coming progress. Mentor Hui tells you to ignore the people burning in hell under the bridge, but it's hard not to take them in. I think the minimalist representation of these phantoms juxtaposes the grandeur of this archway in a really cool way. It leads to a tunnel that connects to another rocky bridge through a large canyon. Mentor Hui tells you to ignore the sinners who hold the bridge up for you. You put trust in her over your own wife, and as it turns out, Mentor Hui is quite callous. At the end of a tunnel lies a tree with a Feng Yu-shaped silhouette inside. You're taken to your inner self. Perhaps fittingly, Feng Yu's is a dark cave besotted by giant quills in place of stalagmites and stalactites, slowly dripping ink on you and the floor from above. Proceeding through the cave, you can eventually find 2 doors, but you can only go into one. Mentor Hui asks you to ignore whatever you see or hear in the coming moments, and you're counseled by a vision of yourself that offers ominous portents about flowers before telling you to claim what you deserve as you go into the following door. You are assaulted on all sides by masked visions of Mei Shin, who eventually scream about being let out. You can dispel them with a prayer to Qi Guayan. Qi Guayan eventually appears, but not before demanding a tithe in blood. What follows in these segments are scenes where Feng Yu, in fairly explicit detail, mutilates himself by ripping out his eyes and tongue in order to appease his oaths to the divine. I don't know if I really want to show that in this video, so I'm going to fade to black when this happens and just let the voice acting do the heavy lifting. It is an absolutely brutal series of decisions. On our way to our last blood sacrifice, I worried that we'd be subjected to the ordeal of cutting off our own set, so you can imagine my horror when I saw I was being offered a pair of scissors. Mercifully, Feng Ye just stabs himself in the hand in order to bloodlet. Shortly afterwards, Mentor Hui says the ritual is done, and leaves you to your prayer. You come back to focus in the waking world in Mentor Hui's apartment. There's some literature about divine rites and ritual consultations around, as well as a tape. In the other room, a tape recorder. You can listen to some of Mentor Hui's consultations, where confirmation of a history of religious predation comes to the surface. The last one among them threatening battery and lawsuits. Your way out of the apartment opens up once you've borne witness to all of this. On your way back to your own apartment, you overhear a phone call where Mentor Hui instructs you through a ritual involving a bathtub, Mei Shin, and snake wine, urging you not to open the door to the bathroom for up to 7 days, to lock her up, to not let her out. Mentor Hui stops taking your calls. It is 1987. There's a drawing of your family by your daughter on the table. It's hard to tell if it's gore or wine spilled on the floor in the hallway. You open the door to the bathroom, and Mei Shin talks about how much she misses her mother, and how you've favored mental hui over modern medicine, how she's found a coping mechanism for her anxiety by folding origami tulips, how she wants to fulfill her dream of being a superstar. I should let the rest speak for itself.
爸爸，我们回家吧。
I think, at its core, devotion is a game about the frustration of things being just a little left of center. It's about the Sisyphean struggle of trying to live up to expectations set by the indomitable edifices of family and culture. The frustration and anxiety of never meeting those expectations, but never truly being able to pull yourself away from trying either. The feeling of being a large fish stuck in a small tank. Devotion is a game that means a lot to me. It's deceptively simple in its core gameplay loop and execution. It makes a sport out of reusing assets. But its sense of atmosphere, its ability to drip feed information across its various stages without feeling obtuse, and its meditations on family, love, and twisted faith make it a very one-of-a-kind experience to me. I think the circumstances revolving around its initial release are unfortunate and unusual, but although Devotion has been cast by the wayside these days, the red candle still burns. They continue to have projects in development, and between Detention and Devotion, I, for one, will be watching them very closely. Thank you very much for watching.
想和你谈论宇宙和天空，或是沙滩里的碎石和人生。你会不会还是坦率地笑着我的